Welcome to the Religious Treehouse. I'm Matthew.
And I'm Jodie.
I am excited for our conversation today, Jody. But first, how are you doing?
I am doing pretty well, Matthew. How are you today?
I am good. At the time of this recording, the conclave has just begun, so I'm so excited to stay updated on that. But I'm doing quite well, or at least I believe I'm doing well. And I guess that gets to the point of today's episode, which is on belief. I'm excited for this. We're stepping away from, you know, general, like, this is what a religion believes, this is what a religion does, religion believes. We'll talk about that. And we're talking about a more general religious studies terminology step back. And I'm excited for this. This should be fun.
Yeah, I have no idea what to expect from today's episode, except Merriam-Webster
Oh, no.
defines belief as a state or habit of mind in which trust or confidence is placed in some person or thing. That was just one definition.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think we'll talk about the various ways that belief is used. And surely that's one way it's used. I don't have I given a rant on dictionaries yet?
No, I don't believe so.
I think dictionaries are wonderfully useful to point us in the direction of words. Like, okay, we look at a dictionary, okay, this is about what it means. But so many times people like are using a word and like, oh, a word means this because the dictionary says so. No, words mean how we use them in conversation. And I think if we always rely on dictionaries to dictate how words are defined, I think it just messes. It's not how words work. It's not how conversation and language works. So dictionary definitions can be helpful, but it's not the end all be all.
But if we don't have dictionary definitions, then what if someone uses like the word commiserate to mean something other than what the dictionary definition is?
Then it'll come to mean a new thing, and language will evolve. But
Evolvement? No,
no, no.
no, let's just keep it status quo, bro.
Yeah, okay. But we're talking about belief today. So before we get into that, how would you, this would be my first question for you, outside of the dictionary, if I were to just be like, hey, Jody, what's belief to you? Well, how would you answer?
You can't use a word when define. You can't use that word when defining the word, can you? Um, it, it, I'm broken. That broke me. That is a question that broke me because belief is in an idea or concept that you hold to be true.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely how we tend to use belief. Uh, and I think that's going to be a fun conversation to think about how belief is attributed within religious settings. And I think I think this episode's not going to be a ton of answers and a lot of, hey, let's ponder about this, which will be fun. But I, so often especially within Christianity, there's this idea of believing in. You believe in God, you believe in something. And that's a weird phrase, don't you think, to believe in something? Like, I can believe in God, but I can also believe in you. And I think there's this weird juxtaposition where, like, belief is rarely discussed on its own terms. It's rarely just, hey, let's talk about belief, but it's often belief in something, belief and knowledge, belief and something. So the idea of having belief in its own right is not a conversation that's talked about a lot. But what are your thoughts on the phrase believe in?
I fear we're going to say belief or believe so many times it'll stop sounding like a word. But believe in, yeah, that is weird. I like because I like to say my belief is, but I remember
Mm.
a point in my life when I would say I believe in, and that's oh gosh, this is going to be a lot of pondering.
Yeah, my bad. This is going to be a ponderous. I don't know if that's a word. I don't know if
It
the
could be
dictionary says
now.
it's a word, but it is now. This is going to be a ponderous episode.
Because, like, when I think of like believing in someone, like, I believe you have capabilities. I believe you can do things. I believe in whatever you want to achieve, whatever your
Mm,
goals and aspirations are. And then when I think about believing in God, I believe that's so open to so many
yeah,
interpretations.
right. And there's this juxtaposition of believing in God implies that there is a belief apart from God. There's a belief in not a God, and and I think that is kind of the foundation of how we talk about belief nowadays. Is you believe in something if a if there's others who believe differently. If we all agree that you know that I have five fingers on my hand, that's not a belief. It's a knowledge, and I don't think that's necessarily true. Like I believe that I'm sitting in this chair. I believe that this chair will hold me, but is that a belief or is that knowledge? And we're getting a bit philosophical here, and it's going to drive into that a bit. But I want I think it's important to think about if talking about belief generally, what is it that we believe in, and what is that we know, what is the overlap?
I don't even know anymore. I think I'm about to have an existential crisis on camera. Oh no.
Cool. And we're just at the beginning. Awesome. So I think the outline for this episode that I want to present is kind of some brief ramblings on belief, which we all already kind of started in. Then I kind of want to talk about two case studies of two religious um, presentations of belief and talk about how they have been presented. So I'm relying heavily on Donald S. Lopez Jr.'s chapter on belief in critical terms for religious studies, edited by Mark Taylor. So we'll link that in our show notes. But the idea of believing has become very simple. It's very simple in the way that we think about it, but it's also has a very long and varied use that we've forgotten the complicatedness of believing, as I feel like I kind of signified a few minutes ago of what does it mean to believe or know. So when we say believe, it's this very simple idea that has a lot of underlying assumptions, and a lot of those underlying assumptions is that Christian idea of belief, especially when we're talking along the ideas of religion, that any adherent of a religion understands that they're part of their religion in terms of their belief. And that seems to be that's a very Christian idea that has permeated so much of Western culture. And belief rather than ritual, for example, seems to be the point in which Christians tell their history and have come to define their religion and also other religions in terms of belief. So because of the how big Christianity is in Western culture, we've come to define all religions in some form of Christian language that revolves around belief in some way or another. And that may not be entirely accurate, as we'll see later.
Because, like, belief is a concept. Weird question, where did that start? But also, like, there had to have been like concepts of belief before Christian ideology, right? Right?
Yeah, right. But I think the difference between the idea of belief, someone believing in something, and the fact that a religion is defined by belief is
Mhm.
different. And
Okay.
I think because of how widespread Christianity is in Western culture, and since Christianity primarily defines itself in terms of belief, that when we look at other religions outside of Christianity, we also try to put it in boxes of belief as well. And that isn't always necessarily the correct way to do it. There is this idea of belief that's throughout culture, for sure. But in order for a religion to be defined in terms of those beliefs, I think is mistaken.
Okay. I'm with you now. I'm with
Cool.
you now. You had to dumb it down a little, but I'm here. I'm
No,
present.
I hope that makes sense. And I hope that later we'll see examples of how that has played out historically.
Yes.
And a little background on belief and again, I'm no linguist, so stepping outside my area here, but just for funsies, it can be traced back to the Old German geluben, which means to hold dear or cherish, and is related to the Indo-European word "liv," which means love or desire. And we get English words like libidinous or love or believe. So, it has this long history of being used in a variety of ways, coming from different terms. And similar to my rant against dictionaries, likewise, we shouldn't fall into an etymological fallacy and say, oh, because the word meant this in the past means that what it means now. It's not the case. We can just see a progression of how words are used. So it's a fun little tangent. German, Indo-European, fun things. But it's often philosophically defined as like a mental state of I think Lopez defines it as a mental state of assent to a proposition already contained in the mind. Um, Maybe that wasn't Lopez. Regardless, it's this idea of we agree to the something that's happening already in our mind. And for David Hume, belief is nothing more but a vivid, intense conception of an idea. So we get all these different philosophical ideas of what belief can be, and it's often portrayed as something weaker than knowledge, because knowledge is something that is true and certainly true, but you can believe in something whether or not it's true or false. And for other philosophers, such as Immanuel Kant, belief is a judgment that is subjectively sufficient but objectively insufficient. And then we get the famous definition for knowledge, which has flaws, but for the most part can be used to some extent. Is that knowledge is a justified true belief, and that gets into more of epistemology, which I don't really want to get into this episode more than we have to. But as a brief talking point into philosophical ideas of belief, how much of that was complete nonsense?
My brain is blank. So
Cool.
most if not all. I am trying my hardest here because it's, like when I think of belief, I think of some very basic things like I believe Sasquatch is real.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that I will wake up the next morning.
Right.
I believe that my parents love me. And I believe that people are good.
Yeah.
And when we were talking about this episode, you knew we'd be coming at it from very different angles
Yeah.
because I think that there is a level to understanding belief that it's it's more complex than I thought.
Yeah. And there's definitely different ways to think about belief, because in religious conversations, the idea is sometimes some people propose that religious belief is different than other forms of belief because it can never be justified by conventional means. So, when you talk about, I believe uh, that you'll wake up tomorrow, like that could be justified because you've woken up all these other days. There's nothing to signify that you wouldn't wake up tomorrow. But when we talk about religious belief, it's a lot harder using conventional means to say, okay, I believe that, pick your religion is real, because that can't really be justified in conventional senses. So I think the point of this episode that I'm trying to talk about is the religious idea of belief, which, of course, obviously overlaps with, I believe that this chair will hold me up that I'm sitting in. But some propose that the religious form of belief is different than, I believe that, you know Pope the next pope will be Cardinal Pizzarella, which by the time this comes out may or may not be true. We don't know. So, and the other problem with religious belief is that it's often resistant to contrary evidence. We can present evidence that is contrary to religious belief, but because it cannot be affirmatively proven, it also can't be necessarily disproven. So we get Tertullian, who says that I believe because it is absurd. And so you can present contrary evidence to a religious belief, and people can still easily hold that belief because they hold that there is an absurdity to it, which I think is one of the best parts of religious belief. The most fun parts of religious belief is because it can be absurd being too without being pressed too much further. Though some people will try to press it further.
Okay. I think I think I'm getting there. It's just gonna take some time. Keep talking.
Yeah, so in Christian theology, belief is usually discussed in terms of the existence of God or the efficacy of miracles or the resurrection of Jesus. And there's been many people that have tried to demonstrate proof of God or at least to justify it as being reasonable, such as Pascal's wager. It's probably one of the most famous versions. But because of its special relation as being a religious form of belief, it can't be proven or disproven. It can only be believed. So So yeah, does that make some sort of sense to an extent?
My brain is in pretzel shape.
Perfect. Perfect. So there's other ideas of belief as well. Some see a causal relationship between belief and knowledge, where belief acts as a preliminary stage of knowledge, where you have a belief and that leads to knowledge. And
Like a
then other,
hypothesis.
yeah, yeah. So that could be a good. You have a hypothesis, you prove it, you prove it to some extent,
Yeah.
and you have knowledge.
Okay.
Woo! But others, and this is I think proposed by William James, sees it differently and sees that proof is not required for belief, but is derived from belief for the sake of others. So you don't need proof to have a belief, but you derive it from a belief in order to explain it to convince others.
Like a sign.
Yeah, say more.
Like a rainbow in the sky.
Right.
When you're looking for, when you have a belief.
Yeah, yeah. So there's no proof required for that, but you can derive proof from it, from that belief. So
Okay.
for James, belief is the primary state. You believe something, and then you build a theology onto that. So without the belief in place, the reason arguments have no power. So you must start with a belief and then build on logic to it.
Okay. Okay, I'm with you.
Other forms of belief see that that belief is this inner function. It's this inner idea that something you have in you, which I don't find that, and that could be convincing to some. Like you have a belief is this internal thought. That's all belief is. But belief seems to have much more historical consequences, and is evident through part of an outer life. And I think we talked about this to some extent, not using this language, but in our cognitive dissonance episode
Mhm.
about the seekers,
Yeah.
is that there's this idea that belief has some manifestation into the physical, where we do stuff in response to the belief.
Yeah,
So,
I think it helped that there was a group for me to look at when we were talking about cognitive dissonance. And now that
uh,
we're talking about belief, I'm like, well, there's so many different beliefs.
right, right.
And I believe that everyone should have their own beliefs because it's sounding like that belief is like a personal thing. And then when you build off that belief, you get religions.
Yeah, no, that's one theory behind it for sure.
Okay.
Perfect. I mean, there's so much happening with belief. It's who knows what's going on,
You know,
but
when a baby's trying to build a block tower, but they just can't because their hands are too chubby and uncoordinated? That's my brain
sure.
trying to put these thoughts together.
Yeah, no, there's a lot, and I apologize. Maybe if we look at two examples, that'll help with creating ideas.
I love an example. Please and thank you.
Cool. So, are you familiar with St. Peter Martyr? I think I did a TikTok video about him a few weeks or months ago. Uh, St. Peter Martyr was killed by a group of Cathars, who was a part of a competing group of Christianity who believed that the world was created by an evil god, And Peter grew up in a Cathar family, but he joined the Dominicans. And then at one point in his life, he was assassinated by a group of Cathars because he confiscated Cathar property as part of his job. So, and this has been depicted in artwork across the years, like tons of beautiful artwork about this. The one that I talked about like doesn't even touch the surface of like how this is presented. But one of the most famous is that in hagiography and in these artworks, he's often depicted writing credo in his blood on the ground as he's being killed. And credo means I believe. And some stories suggest that he was trying to write I believe in God or I believe in one God as a way to kind of stop the Cathar view who believed in two gods, a good and evil God. So then when he's martyred, he's identified as a martyr. Saint Peter Martyr is how he's often referred. And in Catholicism, martyrs are those who die witnessing their faith to their prosecutors. But Peter was assassinated. He wasn't assassinated for his beliefs, he was murdered for his deeds of confiscating property. But the ideology of belief is so powerful in Catholicism that he has been associated with a martyr. So the actions manifested by these beliefs are seen as belief, and this is a martyrdom. He's been martyred.
But by all technicalities, he's not.
By all technicalities, he's not. But because of this deep association between of belief and religion, this is often seen in Catholicism as a martyr.
But I can't tell someone that belief is wrong because technically, no, because it's their
Yeah,
belief.
right. And this also gets into how words are defined. Is a martyr actually this, or because we've come to use this term as a martyr because we define Peter as a martyr, and martyr has come to mean this also.
But because his motivation for doing what he did was belief based,
Mm-hmm.
that's what would then make it not technically not a martyr y thing.
Right. Be- because belief is so important in Catholicism that the actions done on behalf of belief are also, to some extent, sharing a belief.
Which makes them justified, which makes him a martyr in
Yeah.
that belief system.
And right, yeah.
Okay, I'm with you.
And then so after Peter's death, not as a result of Peter's death, but after Peter's death, we also get the Inquisition,
Mm.
which on paper is about belief. Like you got to believe the things we believe, but it seems to be much more about political control. Belief isn't distinguished with words, spoken words, or actions, but by the content of the mind. So once an error is inferred in the mind, the body is subject to punishment. So for the Inquisition, what didn't matter per se or the beliefs that you spoke or did, but by what was inferred and what you believed in your brain. And then from there, they could torture you and kill you based on how the Inquisitions work. So belief has little to do with logic, and this is William James again. What may be compelling in one time or a place may not be compelling in another. The question of belief can't be reduced to belief or one belief in the one true faith, but it must be recognized through a variety of traditions because belief are these multiple ways of looking at things. And sometimes it's manifested through actions, and sometimes it can just be merely inferred through thoughts.
But okay, when you say Inquisition, which
Yeah.
Inquisition are we talking Spanish?
I mean, just in general,
And,
either, all of them, just the Catholic Inquisition. Spanish Inquisition is probably the most famous. So, yeah.
but those were political.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. But because but on paper, it's about belief. Do you believe the right things? We're going to make sure you believe the right things.
But who can define that?
Whoever has power, that's what makes it political.
That's not right. That's not cool, bro.
Sure. Sure.
That's not cool. Not chill. I believe that is not chill. Okay, but what was the question?
I have no idea.
I like literally my brain has lost track of where we are because this is so much more difficult than I thought.
Yeah, no, belief will be confusing like that.
And is this why everyone gets twist turned upside down when people have different beliefs than them? Because
Yeah.
how can you when you're so solid and convicted of your own belief? How is it's not easy to grasp that someone could believe differently?
Definitely. Yeah. Well, I think that's definitely a big part of it. You believe something so firmly that it's hard to distinguish it between. It's very easy to look at other people and poke holes in their beliefs and say, oh, you believe in that, but there's all these different flaws in it. But it's very, very hard to look at your own set of beliefs and poke holes into that. And it's very, very uncomfortable to do that as well. And then we get cognitive dissonance, which we talked about a few weeks back.
I like that one. I'm very comfortable with cognitive dissonance because I'm apparently able to rationalize anything.
Perfect. Yeah. Oh, but the last thing, and perhaps the most important thing with Saint Peter Martyr, is the idea of belief potentially as a wager. So, in regards to a higher being, the believer abandons a present advantage to give an advantage to the receiver of the belief. And I'm drawing again from Lopez here, using much of his language. But the believer abandons a present advantage to give advantage to the receiver of the belief in the hopes of receiving something in the future. In other words, the believer gives up an advantage, gives something up in order for future advantage in some extent. And we'll see this in prosperity gospel. We'll see, okay, give me money now, and God will pay you back tenfold in the future. Or in other forms of Christianity, most forms of Christianity, believe in this God, believe that this God is all powerful and all those things, and you'll go to heaven in the future. So the deferral into the future is what characterizes this belief. And for Peter, he died for this belief. And therefore, because he died for that belief, because he gave up that advantage of his life, he will be delivered into heaven eternally with God. So that's how that form of belief works, belief as a wager that defers your current situation for a better future.
Okay. Yeah. Mm, had to stop a thought. I had to use my thought filter. Um, I see that. I hear that. I can think of different forms of that.
Yeah, and so you get this in uh, and because you defer those advantages that you have now, it can also make it really a lot harder to stop those beliefs because you've given up things in the past. You've given up things that you have in order for a better future. So if you stop now, you're at a loss. That's why it's hard for a lot of people to switch their religious beliefs because they've already sunk so much into that if
Yep.
they change those beliefs, that causes a lot of pain and hurt because the deferment into the future it will go unrewarded.
Yeah. Like if you've given up things like your family or your
Yeah.
house or, even simple pleasures like going out, drinking,
Yeah.
um, things like that, and then deconstructing from that belief would really just shatter everything
Yeah.
that
I
you've built
think
up.
I think perhaps the most vivid thing I can think of is with Jehovah's Witnesses, who don't believe in blood transfusions. And so, if you believe wholly with your whole being that your son, your baby can't have a blood transfusion, and that results in his death, then there's no way in the future that you're going to give up that belief because the cost of that belief being so high is that there's no way you're going to back up on that belief. And I'm not to say I'm not, and there's other points to that too, as
Yeah.
well. It's not just that you believe in this. There's the idea of costly signaling. You're signaling to your in group that you're part of the crowd, that you will continue to be part of them by believing these things and signaling that you are part of the group, and you incur that cost as well. So there's more to this than just mere belief. But no, there's certainly a lot going on.
Yeah. Honestly, I think this conversation is giving me a lot more respect for maybe others' beliefs
Mm-hmm.
because to put that much stock, put that much faith,
Yeah,
belief into something that you would have to sacrifice or signal to others like how deeply you believe. And yeah, you never know what someone's journey has been.
yeah. No, so there's a lot when it comes to belief.
Yeah.
But moving on from Peter, do you have any more thoughts on the very brief thoughts on Peter?
Um, no, just thinking about inquisitions and how they're not
Perfect.
rad.
um, but what Lopez poses as another example is in 19th century Sri Lanka, or Ceylon at the time there. And this is, kind of a time where the concept that a religion must have belief is introduced to the people. So we get Henry Steele Olcott and Helena Blavatsky, who are the founders of the Theosophical Society.
Mm,
I think I've mentioned them before, maybe briefly, but we
sure.
didn't talk about them in depth.
Yeah.
Um, but they're the founders of the Theosophical Society, and they traveled to Asia uh, to learn about East Asian religions and mainly Buddhism, to learn and try to tie it to theosophy. So what Olcott did was he said, okay, I'm going to try to write a Buddhist catechism, even though he was only very recently introduced to the religion and was largely ignorant of it. But he said, we need a catechism for Buddhism. Um, and he claimed that the Buddhist masters there where he was studying refused to write one. And that tells a lot more about Olcott than the Buddhist clergy. Uh, because in the catechism, Olcott was focused on trying to return Ceylon, I think I'm pronouncing that right, I could be wrong, to the spirit of true Buddhism. Even though the Buddhists of that time probably couldn't list the Four Noble Truths of the Buddha, which is commonly taught in any world religions class, which is again how in the Western eye, this is how we think about all these religions. We have to narrow them down to a set of beliefs. But this idea comes from the assumption that belief comes from Christianity, and that religion is this interior state of agreement to certain truths. In the West, Buddha is often seen as a great philosopher, and we try to define Buddhism based on texts rather than just watching people and learning how people practice Buddhism. So Olcott therefore thought that he could distill Buddhism to a set of beliefs, and he did this. I think he had good intentions. Like he was doing this in attempts to try to stop the Christian colonizers and say, okay, we need to like figure out your set of beliefs so we can like see how this compares against Christianity. We need to stop the Christians from converting you. We need to respect your beliefs. That's what he was trying to do.
Yeah, it's giving white savior complex. But
100%. Yeah. So he thought that if he could distill Buddhism down to, I think he was 14 different fundamental Buddhist beliefs, he could unite the schism between different sects of Buddhism. He said, okay, if we can distill Buddhism to see how we agree on these 14 different things, then we can make everyone happy and like, okay, Buddhism is all united and together. And that resulted in another schism.
well, yeah,
So
because that wasn't that reductive to like try
yeah,
to boil it down to 14 things.
definitely. That's definitely a part of it. But the fact that no these are Sinhalese Buddhists. The fact that no Sinhalese Buddhist tried to produce a text to reduce Buddhism to these sets of beliefs suggests that the category of belief is not transferable from one culture to another. The idea of our Western Christian idea of belief is not transferable to this Buddhist culture. So anytime we're taught about East Asian religions, famously, those are perhaps worse fit into our box of belief. Anytime we're introduced to that as Westerners, it often has to be adjusted into our set of beliefs so that we can better understand it. Because it's so hard for us to think of a religion as not just being a set of beliefs, as these Sinhalese Buddhists clearly did not have. This was not a set of beliefs that was their religion.
Yeah, I don't know why, but when we were talking about something so familiar to me, like with Peter, my brain could not handle it. I can handle this.
Yeah.
I don't know why. And they needed to boil it down to 14 points, but I'm like, no. Like, of course
Right.
they're schisming. Like, they're having a disagreement on beliefs, and like, I understand a schism.
Yeah. We
Like,
love a
and
good schism.
yeah, okay. So
No,
then what
but
happened?
but I mean that's primarily the end of the story. The idea of there's religions that don't fit into our boxes of belief.
Yeah.
And the reason that we think of belief having this universal category is because of Christianity's allyship with political power throughout Western history. And because of that, we think that uh, uh, belief is the thing that religion should be measured against, which isn't necessarily true.
Yeah.
Which begs the question: What then should religions be measured against? And who knows? That's it's where it gets complicated. This is where the field of religious studies gets all murky and where people get really confused. Uh, but Robert Orsi proposed that uh, in place of belief, scholars of religion talk about discipline, practice, materiality, embodiment, authority, memory, performance, and power. Just to list some examples of how we can conceptualize religion, and that's all good, but that goes back to the problem before, where again we're just creating these hierarchical theoretical structures, and where the religious theorizing takes the high ground. Like, oh no, where it's not just all belief, it's all about embodiment. That's how religion is practiced. It's embodiment, and that should be set above uh, the performance of religion, for example, just listing two things off the list. So I think it's, instead of looking at belief, instead of looking at discipline, instead of looking at ritual, it's much more beneficial to understand religions beyond these static notions of belief. And instead, I think it's important to realize there's dynamic and fluid understandings that help with the routes of understanding and imagination and memory and desire and fear and consciousness that circulate between people and humans, and their divine special beings. And again, this is coming from Robert Orsi. So the idea that we can reduce religion down to one group, we can put it into a box of some sort, is impossible. But we should understand that instead of trying to put it in boxes, we should understand that there's a lot going on. And at some point, we're going to need an episode on how to define religion, because we can't. That's so hard. And it's going to be another one of these weird thinking episodes where I'm not just talking about, let's look at this fun group, but the idea of defining religion so hard that no scholar really agrees on how to define religion, because it's so dynamic and there's so many different forces playing and there's so many different ways to do it that it's really hard to define religion.
I don't know. I feel like we should define those episodes as visual ones so people have to watch my face the entire time you talk. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no, defining religion sounds like so much fun, and it's definitely needed because, it's very easy, I think, for people to, and I'm gonna move past the religious thing back to belief. Like, when we're talking about belief, like I think it's easy to dismiss other people's beliefs until
Mhm.
you define belief and you understand what belief is. And now I'm like rethinking a lot of things. And
Yeah,
like,
it's really easy to do that, but also it's important to realize that what people believe isn't necessarily the point.
yeah,
As we saw with Sinhalese Buddhists, belief wasn't really the point of what they were doing.
yeah, no. And I
And
agree. I'm just coming at it from this Western Christian
yeah,
dominant view.
and
But continue.
and I think the other thing is that we often think that our beliefs are logical, that we believe things because logically that is what it goes back to, because facts are why we believe things, and that's not true, I think, for really anyone. And I touched on this earlier that we probably don't come up with logic and facts and then form our beliefs. We form with beliefs and then have logic and facts to back them up. But if we live in this world where we say all my beliefs are logical and factual, I think you have to spend so much of your time defending that, and it better be true, because if all your beliefs are factual and true, then you have to be able to defend that. But if we admit that our beliefs are not necessarily factual, or our beliefs are not necessarily defendable, I think that allows a lot more opportunity to kind of just break free and be like, okay, yeah, I believe in this because it's comfortable and it makes sense and it helps me make sense of the world. And this is why I believe that. And it's not that I believe in this because it's logical and factual. It may very well be true. It may very well not be true. But I think we have to note that there's a difference there.
Yeah.
So
I'll
yeah,
send you the
that was a
bill for
lot.
my headache.
That was a lot. A lot happened. Oh, there's so much more we could talk about, I'm sure. But as a brief introduction to belief, and getting, as I said, a ponderous episode. I hope that this more so, instead of providing answers, provided something to think about, uh, and realign what it means to believe, because I think it's more complicated than we'd like it to be.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah. Because, if we really thought about the complications and the context of the world we live in, I don't think people would be nearly as happy as they are.
sure. Yeah. And if we had to justify everything that we believed,
Yeah.
it would just be impossible.
I'm not justifying Bigfoot. I don't need to justify Bigfoot.
No, you don't have to. And as I said in our cognitive dissonance episode, I believe in Bigfoot, even though Bigfoot's not real.
It's Kane
Yeah.
walking around.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you all for listening. This was a fun episode where I monologued a lot, and I apologize for that. But if you enjoyed this episode, let us know what you think. Send us comments or emails. And if you hated this episode, send us comments and emails. We'd love to hear them. But we're on uh, Instagram, TikTok, X, Bluesky, Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify and Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. We're there, and we're so excited to hear from you.
He said X, he meant Twitter.
Yeah, all of them. We're on both. All right. Bye, all.
Bye.